Um, I've got that. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about the focus and metrics. What are we trying to achieve with this? Walk you through some of the criteria about how we're sort of defining and thinking about rapid training. Give you just some examples, not because they are what we're trying to do, just leaning into those examples, but more give you some illustration in some ways of sort of the breadth and diversity of rapid training programs that we're looking to determine, and then just a little bit about sort of how we're thinking about trying to implement this program. And please feel free, maybe Nicole, if there are people questions in the chat or people want to put their hand up and interrupt, please do. Happy to answer questions as we go through here. So the focus, developer adapted additional training. This is really about getting people into jobs and addressing the workforce shortages that we know are substantial nationally, in our state, across most industries, and helping people get the skills that can get them into those jobs and or help existing organizations, existing employers and their employees add skills that can help them obviously sort of get promoted, maybe earn some more, but also essentially enhance the growth and productivity of those businesses. Rapid training metrics, these are the metrics we've been provided by the state that we have to report on. So as any of you know, with sort of grant funded activities, we've got to make sure we're reporting our progress. So to the extent we're engaging with partners across the state and distributing funds, we're going to be obviously having expectations on you or the organizations we're working with to help us track and report these metrics. They're not complicated. It's essentially, let's get people into these training programs, let's get them into the jobs, let's kind of track those outcomes. In terms of rapid workforce training criteria, we are loosely, well, I'd say relatively tightly defining it as training programs that would deliver a training outcome in less than 6 months. So how do we get someone in potentially much shorter than that? So I'll talk a little later. Many of you are probably aware of the Job Site Ready program, which is a good example of rapid training. And that's 45 hours of training, not necessarily consecutively, but it's 30 hours of online, 15 hours of kind of in-person, kind of on-site training. So it could be something as relatively short as that. It could be something more bootcamp models, sort of the AIM Hire program with ATG Cognizant, that's a 12-week, essentially full-time. Montana Code School is 18 weeks part-time. So there's some flexibility and variability in that, but we want to get people through training quickly so we can get them into the workforce quickly and having an impact. That said, there's sort of a caveat or a proviso or an exception to that, which is there may be training programs that run much longer, but if essentially they're more sort of an apprentice style where there's sort of a blend of training with work experience, if someone can go through training, be in the workforce, earning, having an impact to that employer, but continuing to go through training, that is a program that I think kind of works well with this. We recognize that you're not necessarily going to learn everything you need or gain the skills that you need to do everything in the job in just one kind of initial kind of training. There's continuing kind of need. We're looking for training that we can get executed in kind of short order. This is 2 years worth of funding, essentially the 2 calendar years, so 2022 and 2023. So the clock is already running. So we need to be able to deploy these funds, get folks through training programs and get them into jobs in the next 2 years. So we need training programs that we can develop and deliver relatively rapidly. I think one of the things we're really looking to do, and this is a key part of the conversation we've been having with the 2-year college system, how do we sort of leverage and sort of share expertise and resources across the state so that not every community, every institution is sort of having to sort of do its own thing and try to make things work in that community. If we can share curriculum, if we can share instructors, if we can put online programs together, we can potentially make the economics, make the funding work by sort of pooling employers and pooling potential trainees that can go through a training program and then be deployed with those employers in specific communities across the state. So we'll use online and asynchronous delivery to help facilitate that, make it easier for people to take training, but also looking to use multiple locations to try to reduce the barriers of people being able to access that training. We'll also be putting time and energy into what we loosely term in the sort of the education and training kind of system wraparound services. So we know that just offering a training does not necessarily get the outcome, right? We have to, one, create awareness of the training, create awareness of the career and the role and the job opportunity that someone might benefit from by going through that training. We need to navigate them to understand how to get enrolled. Are there any kind of preliminary steps they need to take or that are part of their ability to leverage the training? So something like a commercial driver's license, CDL, there's a kind of drug testing requirement there for someone to be able to get the CDL. There are things that need to go on around the training that are beyond sort of the classroom or the online learning experience that we know are potential sort of barriers or hurdles or kind of things that cause people to potentially fall out of the training kind of path and fall out of being the outcome that we're looking for, which is a trained person that can take the job. So we will be putting resources into folks as part of the Accelerate team to really support learners on that journey to get them connected to employers. So a bunch of things there we can talk about. Some examples. Nicole, do you think it's fair? Most people are familiar with these 3 programs, or should I take a minute or two to talk about them?
I'm not sure actually. I would say perhaps, but you might run through them really fast.
I'll give a 60-second cliff notes on all 3 and sort of try and compare and contrast. So the AIM Hire program, we've been doing that with ATG Cognizant, based out of Missoula since the beginning of 2019. It's a 12-week boot camp. It takes people from a range of backgrounds and puts them through a boot camp that makes them essentially Salesforce implementation consultants. This is a really interesting model. I sort of describe it, maybe because I'm British, as the Rolls-Royce model, because it's an expensive, high touch, high investment model, but one that works for ATG. They selectively recruit people into the program. They pay for them to go through the training. They guarantee them a job interview at the end of that training. And so far, they've hired every single one of them. It's about 180 people that have gone through that program in the last couple of years that have been hired into kind of high-paying jobs. So that's one example. Montana Code School is sort of different. It's in some ways at the other end of the spectrum I talk about. In the Code School, people are paying their way through learning the code. We've been running the Code School since 2015. It was originally in person, full-time and part-time in Missoula and Bozeman. It's now online, so it's accessible to anyone across the state. It's now an 18-week part-time program. But those individuals are signing up saying, hey, I want to get into coding. I want to get into potentially the tech industry. They're paying their way through, which is it's just under $5,000 to go through that training program. And then they are sort of hoping, we think it's a good aspiration and a good bet, that they will then be hired into a kind of tech-related job, ideally in Montana. And our track record has suggested that generally people are pretty successful in doing that. But it's, the reason I highlight these 2, partly because they're been successful programs, but they're very different, right, in terms of sort of the investment that's needed in training and who's making that investment. And we know that's going to be a critical component of the rapid training, is figuring out how do we pay for people to go through the training. And I'll talk a little bit about kind of the budget and the kind of funding and how we utilize that momentarily. Job Site Ready, very different program. We're talking about 45 hours of training. It's intended to get people ready to essentially start a construction job and be kind of safe and effective on a construction site. So these are just 3 examples. I use them not because they are sort of the ideal of what we're looking for. It's more actually to illustrate the diversity, both of sort of the kinds of training programs, where they fit in someone's sort of learning experience, the industries that we can tap into. So we will be focused across industries. There is prioritization or priorities from kind of the governor and state government around 4 particular industries, which is construction, manufacturing, healthcare, and tech. So that those are key focus areas, but that doesn't mean to say if there are good opportunities to get people in jobs, then we can figure out the right training program, that we're not going to kind of deploy resources to execute on those. Here's how we're trying to sort of manage. And in some ways, I think what we're trying to do here is build, in an ideal world, a sort of sustainable workforce system where we can, on an ongoing basis, efficiently and kind of flexibly match potential trainees with employers that are looking for those skills. And that's going to need a collaboration between employers for us to understand what are their skills needs, what are their hiring needs, how do we make sure we've got training courses that are really delivering the skills that someone can be effective in that job or effective in the new job that they're being promoted up to. We need to work very closely with our training institutions, particularly the Montana University system, the two-year colleges, the tribal colleges, but there are also other private and kind of other training organizations across the state. Very happy to work with them if they have training programs that meet employer needs and that we can get people into. And then thirdly, and this in many ways potentially I think is the biggest challenge here, given current unemployment levels across the state, which are obviously kind of pretty low, is how do we get people to get into these training programs? How do we get the word out? How do we recruit them in? We think there's probably a key ability to do that is to reach into those kind of populations that frankly are not even showing up in the unemployment numbers, but are not in the workforce right now. That may be women who were forced out essentially through COVID and kind of family responsibilities. It's our Indigenous communities. It may be formerly incarcerated. So there are a number of workforce sort of demographics that are currently underrepresented or face significant barriers getting into the workforce. We think that's an opportunity to kind of reach into those communities and try to help navigate them into the workforce. But that's why I was excited to have the opportunity to kind of on this call. That's going to take all of us, right, to work, get the wording out or get the messaging out, engage people, figure out how do we kind of bring these things together. I've been using an airline system or an air system analogy for this, which is sort of Accelerate Montana sitting a little bit in the middle as sort of air traffic controllers here. But the employers are the destinations, the training organizations are kind of the airlines and the kind of own the planes. And then the rest of you are sort of part of the travel industry that goes around that. And our job is to make sure that we're sending people to destinations that are great destinations, right? There are jobs when they get there, and that we're flying planes there that are full, right? That we've got trainees on those planes who are ready to do the job when they arrive. We do not want to be sending planes that are empty, or we do not fill up planes and send them to places that have no jobs. So that's our collective goal here, and where Accelerate sees its role is really trying to sort of draw this information together, understand what's possible, what's available, what's needed, and bring those resources together. The outcome is on the right-hand side there is delivering training cohorts around the state. So for example, we might find we've got 8 people who want to get into the construction kind of trades. We deliver that job site ready training program at Miles Community College. There are 3 construction companies that want to hire those people. That's the triangulation we're going to need to do, and we're going to need to do that literally hundreds of times over across different training programs in different locations, working with different colleges to execute that. So that's really what we're looking to do, and really looking to find employers that we can kind of work together with in partnership, predominantly with the 2-year college system, but not exclusively, to get those people into jobs. So here's how we're thinking about the funding. And I highlight the numbers are illustrative, right? The only number that is correct on this is $3 million a year. So it's $6 million over 2 years. We anticipate funds being distributed to do a number of things. But first off, if you think about how training is currently delivered, clearly there's a cost to delivering training. There's a cost to developing a course, a cost to instructors, other associated costs with running some form of training program. Typically, those costs are covered by training organizations by charging the trainee something to go through that training, whether that is paid for by the individual or whether that's paid for by their employer or some other mechanism. We don't anticipate suddenly making all training across the state free. If we were to do that, I mean, sure, lots of people would be excited about that. The money would go very quickly. So we still anticipate some funding coming in to pay for training. That might come from the trainee. It might come from an employer. It might come through some of the incentives and grant programs that are available to individuals and or organizations to help pay for training, right? So there's a funding source on the other end from the funding source we have. But there are instances in which we will essentially send funds for training delivery to a training institution, because we've concluded that the kind of people that we want to recruit into those training programs do not have the funds to pay for the training. right? So we're essentially providing scholarships. Or there might be a location where the economics of delivering that course might typically require 10 students to be in the course to make it kind of cover its costs. But if we've got, like on the previous slide, 6 or 8 trainees wanting to take it and employers that want to hire them, we should get that done, right? So we can provide some funding to that college to cover the funding gap that they would have on executing that training program. So that's how we would see funds being deployed to deliver courses. We'd also see funds being deployed essentially as sort of scholarship monies. We may also spend money to help develop training, right? So if we identify there's a gap, there's a skills need, but we don't have training courses available sort of within the current training system, and we can't source training potentially from sort of third-party organizations, and we need to develop some course, we'll put funds into that. Clearly, how big that number is or isn't depends on how big is that kind of the gap between the skills needs and the training capabilities we have in the state. And then finally, we'll be putting money into our ability to promote this program. How do we get as many employers as possible aware of it so we can understand what their needs are, so we can aggregate those and therefore hopefully get more people. The more employers we know, the more we can sort of promote the fact there are jobs and training associated with that. We've got better chances, right, of getting people that want to sign up for those training. How do we create awareness around those? So that's, as I mentioned Lisa at the start of the call, that's one of the things she's really going to be helping us think about. But we'll also need all of you on this call, right, that work in your communities and are having conversations and have marketing channels as well. We're going to need you to help us get the word out so we can hopefully both talk to the employers and attract trainees into these programs. And then as I've talked about this sort of wraparound service, this is where the outreach coordinators, so we're going to be looking to hire 8 to 10 outreach coordinators located around the state whose job it is will be to sort of supplement what is already being done by kind of by the colleges, by the job service, by economic development organizations. Those people are already doing some of this work, but I'm sure all of you, I don't think I speak to anyone that says they have all the resources they need, right? So we're going to try to supplement that so we can have someone who's boots on the ground, adding to those conversations, working with the employers, working with the colleges, starting to navigate people through that process. So we have a job description. We should be getting that up very shortly, and I'll obviously send that to Gloria so we can get that out, because many of you may know people that would be interested in those jobs and have the right kind of skills to do those jobs. One of those coordinators will be an Indigenous outreach coordinator to work particularly with our Indian populations and with the tribal colleges through this process. We are looking with the way we're sort of addressing this is we have some programs that we know are already working, both some of the ones I've highlighted as well as many of the colleges have programs that they're already executing. They want to help, they need funds to help sort of grow those, get the word out, potentially make them a little more economic. But what we're really seeking is employers that want to work with us to help really make sure those programs are meeting their needs, but also that are saying, hey, we recognize the problem. We're willing to sort of invest some time and or money in making sure that there is something compelling and attractive to bring trainees into. So we've got a couple of conversations in sort of 2 or 3 areas already going on, sort of in manufacturing and sort of IT, kind of early sort of admin, IT admin, kind of IT specialist type skills. Those are just a couple of examples, but we're looking, where can we pull some employers that would work together to help us make sure we've got the right curriculum and that we can get people kind of through these programs quickly. Good example on sort of the IT admin arena is we've been talking to an employer who says, yeah, I need folks that have basic kind of desktop IT support skills. He's talked with one of the community colleges. They have the curriculum to teach most of what he needs, but it's part of a 2-year program. He's like, could the college bundle those things together, maybe put it together as a boot camp that might take a few weeks or a couple of months, maybe on a sort of part-time basis, but get someone through that within 3 months, then he can hire them. They can be earning, be productive for his business, and still continue their education towards that kind of potential kind of 2-year associate's degree. So those are some of the sort of conversations we're trying to have to sort of piece these things together. What are we looking for sort of from you? This was actually from a conversation we had with the 2-year college system, so it's a little more oriented to the kind of the training organizations, but I think the broad philosophy is the same to those of you that are on this call in different organizations that are associated with workforce. What we want to hear from you is, what are you hearing locally? What are the needs you see? How can you help us get the word out? If we give you kind of information about the programs that are available, what can you do to kind of distribute that? And what we bring, we'll bring some of that marketing collateral, we'll bring people that can help kind of do some of the kind of blocking and tackling of hopefully working with those employers, working with those potential trainees to navigate them kind of through the process. I won't go through the detailed action plan. We can sort of talk about those things. This is the team. Feel free to email me, but also if you email all 4 of us, there's a good chance that kind of one of us will get back to you kind of sooner than just emailing me. And obviously we'll be adding to this team and getting kind of more information out. So I'm going to stop there. And
Thanks,
happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, any questions?
Paul, this is Anne.
Hi, Anne.
You mentioned a little bit about adding programs. I know that I've been following the MSU extension remote worker. Is that going to qualify, or how does that work? Would that work with them potentially?
I think we definitely see remote working as clearly a strong opportunity. We're talking with one of the economic development organizations around ways we can sort of lean into kind of doing more of that. The key there obviously is our sort of overarching criteria is, do we have employers who want to hire those people, right? So that's part of what we need to solve, is how do we figure out who are the employers that are interested and willing to hire remote workers and ready to accommodate that. One of the things we've actually talked a little bit about within the rapid training, but also tomorrow we'll be submitting, as some of you know, an application to the EDA for the Good Jobs Challenge, which we're going to ask for about 21 million, which will give us a lot that we can do collectively across the state. One of the things we've highlighted in there, but I think will also be part of the rapid training program, is actually training for employers. So how do we train employers to think about the kind of people they need to bring in, whether that's folks from some of the underrepresented communities or whether it's sort of remote workers? How do you run a business that can kind of work effectively with remote workers? I mean, another example, our colleague Mike Braun was on a panel, I think with the Montana Contractors Association. And one of the employers there was saying they are creating roles for women to work in construction, where they are doing sort of 4-hour shifts, right? So they're breaking up a traditional 8 to 10 hour kind of FTE job and enabling women who can kind of split their day. So I think there's a lot of work we need to do to sort of help employers think in this kind of tight workforce environment, and with the shifts and changes that COVID has brought upon us one way or another, to have employers just think a little differently about how to bring people into the workforce.
Okay, thank you.
Paul, will some of that training of the employers involve training for communicating with students who are in an apprenticeship program or a pre-apprenticeship program?
I think if that's something we see the need for, then let's talk about that. Yeah. So, so Dorothy, happy to have a follow-up conversation with you or with others that you think we should talk about. Interestingly, this is not so much related to kind of this workforce piece, but in one of my other hats with the Blackstone Launchpad and the AMRI program that Carl Unterschutz runs, that many of you know, we've been running a project support internship, and we're actually working on something right now to put a platform in place to onboard interns. And it's as much about onboarding the employer of the intern as it is about onboarding the intern. So we're working on a platform to try to address some of that, so that those sort of expectations are clear up front, right? When does the intern say, hey, I need help here, right? And how is the employer kind of making sure that intern's set up for success? So, yeah.
Is that Carl's? I'm super interested in that. And it's something I've talked about. It sounds like a similar kind of effort to, to train employers about how to have effective internships. Is that Carl Interchanges?
Yeah, so Carl and our amazing student Jake and the Launchpad are leading that. So we've been doing small, what we call project support internships, where we've been having students work with entrepreneurs. And that's sort of, it's an almost an extreme case of internship. Normally you expect at least the kind of the employer to know what it is that they're asking the intern to do. With entrepreneurs. Sometimes it's like they're hiring an intern to do the stuff that they as the entrepreneur don't know how to do. But yeah, we're working on that. And Nicole, I know some of your conversations with sort of experiential learning at they've sort of looked at what we're doing and sort of viewing us as sort of piloting that kind of onboarding process and kind of platform. So there's a good chance that we may be able to sort of roll that out more broadly for some of the more kind of traditional internship programs.
Maybe we'll have to have Carl on one of these next meetings to talk about that, clearly I need to talk to him.
Yeah, no, you should. I mean, it's been one of our most successful programs. It's really students, it's a win-win, right? The students getting great entrepreneurial experience working for an entrepreneur, and the entrepreneurs getting a help on some stuff that they don't have the bandwidth or sometimes the skills to do themselves.
Any other questions for Paul? I have one. Where do you see this is obviously a meeting of statewide folks. I think looking at who's on the call, we have Great Falls, we have Billings, we have, and try to get broad representation from across the state. Where do you feel like your gaps are, kind of geographically, as far as like, where are there areas? You mentioned, working with Indigenous groups on the different reservations. Are there like areas that you feel like you need more outreach to right now?
There's no other sort of necessarily, I think, more or less right now. That may emerge a little. I mean, I would just emphasize we absolutely want to be statewide. The 8 to 10 outreach coordinators, welcome people's sort of input and help with this. I mean, we're trying to deliver a sort of complex message in recruiting for those roles, which is saying, look, we're somewhat open with where those people are located. But we need to make sure that when we build that team, that it is geographically distributed across the state. So we've sort of suggested, obviously, them being somewhat close to a 2-year or a tribal college would be beneficial. So I mean, clearly there are some locations that naturally sort of make sense because of their centers of kind of population, centers of kind of employment, but we need to be able to reach all corners of the state. So please encourage people. It's interesting, having made the comments around kind of training and what employers expect. I think we're also in a how do we train employers to think differently about who and how they recruit. So literally, as we were writing the job description, we took off the degree requirement, because the skills someone needs to do this are not necessarily about whether they do or don't have a degree. It's about, are they good at building relationships? Are they good at communication? Are they good at problem solving?
Right.
Are those positions you foresee as outreach permanent positions? I mean, ongoing, or is it a short, what time frame?
It's essentially, John, aligned to the funding, which is 2 years of funding.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, I think we would all like to figure out how do we sustain, hopefully, the capability that we collectively build across the state beyond that. And if we can demonstrate it's having impacts, then hopefully state government, employers, others will kind of figure out how to continue to fund that. Whether that funding flows through accelerators sort of is neither here nor there. It's whether the funds flow to kind of support those kind of capabilities.
Mm-hmm.
Paul, we have a manufacturing alliance get together on the 22nd, which it would be great to have this information. I'd be happy to bring that along.
I'd be happy to provide information to you, or I or one of our team could come.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
Lorraine Clarno set it up from the chamber. I don't know if Jen is on this call or not, but Jen Kronk. But it's to reestablish and just get the ball rolling with our manufacturers again after COVID.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, manufacturing is high on our list. I mean, we had a conversation with Patty Fleming yesterday about some of the training capabilities they have and where some of the needs are. So yeah, let's talk some more about that. If you have my email, or if not, we'll get it to you. Drop me an email. We'll follow up on that. And that's how I think this is going to be done. It's lots and lots of conversations like that we're starting to have with employers, with chambers, with two-year colleges, getting down to the nitty-gritty. This is even for Brett to use a baseball analogy, this is a singles and doubles, not a home run.
This is a perfect opportunity for those outreach people, right?
Well, and Paul, do you think if you set up a training in one area, like let's say for a manufacturing company, it's my understanding that you would then try to make that, broadly, as broadly available and applicable to as many employers as possible, and maybe try to scale it with, try to make it fully remote so it's not geographically restricted. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think we're trying to, how do we sort of create economies of scale and scope? So for example, I mean, the two-year colleges are super excited about this. They want to engage and deliver on this, but we know they're resource constrained, right? Their faculty are not sitting around twiddling their thumbs. They're already delivering training programs. But so let's say, I don't know, let's say it's a welding program and it's running in Havre, but they need it in Miles Community College and they don't have, and these are probably both technically incorrect descriptions, but just roll with work with me here. If Miles Community College doesn't have the faculty member, well, the instructor to do that, but kind of Havre does, it's like, let's use the funds to pay for the travel and transportation for that instructor to go down to kind of Miles City for a week or whatever, a few days, whatever it needs to be to deliver that. We've talked about several colleges are super interested in kind of growing their CDL, commercial driver's license program, right? Kind of, they need trucks, but does every college need a truck, or can we share a truck between some colleges? So those sorts of things. How do we share resources? The Job Site Ready is a really good example because that was a number of colleges working together and working directly with employers to develop the curriculum. So the curriculum was defined by them, not by essentially sort of the academic institutions.
Well, excuse me, Paul, are you going to also include, I mean, all of this is kind of a pull. You're pulling people in to meet certain career goals. Are you also going to push some of the unique classes and instruction venues that we have for those really specialized things? And as a way to attract students to come to the U, or potential employees to come. And I'm thinking, most specifically of Western has got a horsemanship tract, and they also have a glass blowing tract, which are right now in huge demand, but would even be more in demand if more knew about them.
I think, Russ, yeah, I think if there are programs that are connecting people to jobs, then that will be our goal, and Lisa's role to help us working with others to get the word out. So the challenge is, how do we find those people? How do we do that messaging? But we've done that with some of the programs. Code School is sort of obviously the one I'm most kind of familiar with. But yeah, that's the question. How do we find those people? And it's not out of the question that some of the people we want to bring in here, right, are out of state. So encourage them to come here.
Yeah, well, I love U of M's mule packing classes are oversubscribed.
We'll do mule packing if we've got a bunch of people that want to.
Not an in-demand skill.
It is, because all the us old packers are dying.
That's true across multiple industries. I mean, that's a key challenge for the state, right? That and messaging we put in the Good Jobs Challenge application is we've got a shrinking workforce, right? We've got boomers retiring and we've got a shrinking kind of high school demographic. So unless we can encourage more people to come here, we've got to figure out in a lot of industries, how do we make them those jobs and those industries more tech enabled? So how do we give people the detailed tech skills to develop and deploy some of those technologies? How do we train people to utilize those technologies? And how do we persuade to train management to understand how technology has a role inside their business? Maybe not in mule packing, Russ, but some of the other industries, yeah.
I think, what is it, in a few years, Montana will be the grayest state west of the Mississippi.
Mhm.
It's a challenge.
Well, and I think one of the, you know, when thinking about marketing and drawing people into programs like these, it's important to kind of emphasize the real impact it has on the employees' lives. Like with the ATG AIM, we've, you know, actually like had events where we've had a speaker from is one of the graduates of those cohorts, and the wage that they earn after going through that short training program can be a huge game changer, especially if they're coming in. There's no barriers to entry for that program. So you can be, I mean, I think if you have your GED or a high school diploma, you can go through it. So we have people who've gone through it who have come from bartending and, you know, a pretty low wage, low skill occupations who are now making really good wages after going through. So I think once you get people in the pipeline, they will help they can help market the program for you. Just through testimonials and word of mouth. Any other questions for Paul?
So what are you asking us to do, Paul? And I saw some things on the slide, but what can we start doing as soon as we get off this call?
I think reaching out, like sort of the things that Dorothy's talked about, for example, reaching out to our team to say, hey, here's some ideas, or here's the need that we're hearing, so that we can start to wrangle kind of where the priority needs, or where there are opportunities that we can execute, and frankly start deploying funds quickly, right? How can we get people in training courses kind of quickly? So we're still very much in sort of startup mode here. There's going to be an informational session on February 24th that will also help get the word out. There was an announcement that came out from the state that Gloria shared. So we're starting to capture information from people that are wanting to talk to us about it. We're already working with the 2-year system to understand what are some of the training programs that they think they have sort of either ready to roll, or where they need help to sort of scale up or execute those programs. So we're still very much in information gathering. So I would say, if you have ideas or questions about how you can be involved, reach out to our team, and we'll be happy to take that kind of call and set up the time to kind of better understand how we can try to execute on the needs and opportunities you see out there. Over time, hopefully we'll be a little more structured than that, but we're essentially, our entrepreneurial experience and is standing us in good stead. We're treating this as a lean startup. Let's be responsive and then build and adapt once we understand how to hopefully do this as effectively as possible.
Mm-hmm.
I will do, Russ.
Yeah. Yeah, I think actually if we could send out info on that 224 event. I think also, Paul, if we could have your slides, either I or Gloria can send them out to this group, because there are, I think, a few people who couldn't make the call today, who might want to learn more, and kind of have the emails for your whole team.
Happy to do that. And the 224 event only got, I think, confirmed yesterday, so that's why I haven't heard anything about it yet.
Come on, Paul, rapid.
It's got a $21 million grant proposal to get in by the end of tomorrow.
Do you need co-signers? Do you need more support? Is MEDA on board?
We got everyone on board, from the governor, the WOCHI, we've got, I think, about 60 letters of support from employers and from boys and girls clubs. I mean, we've got an awesome kind of diverse group of letters of support. So we're feeling optimistic, but as you know, I mean, Russ, they're going to get a lot of responses, but we've been able to benefit. We're actually through a program called America Achieves, they connected us with McKinsey. So McKinsey have been giving us feedback, and they've been working with a number of players, and they feel very kind of good about kind of our proposal. And as you probably know, kind of Montana did not essentially benefit from the Build Back Better program other than there's one kind of native funding program, which is cool. But essentially there was a big gap in the EDA's map on Build Back Better. So we're hoping that kind of Montana will see some benefit from kind of the Good Jobs Challenge.
Well, I'm so glad to see this program being initiated. I remember I posted a story probably 12 years ago, 14 years ago from, I think it was Arizona. But in Phoenix, the local Pepsi dealer was getting in two new machines that were high tech and really very, very modern, and they had nobody to run them. So they contacted the junior college. They put 4 people through a 2-week course, and they got certified on the machines. And that's rapid. That's the kind of thing. What have you seen in terms of best practices from other states that have maybe been doing this for some time?
And we've been looking at what's going on in the higher education space for a couple of years now. As you probably know, co-chair the university design team at UM. I mean, the disruption in higher ed is substantial, and it's happening across the country. So, I mean, we're reading and seeing kind of the examples of people doing these kind of things, and that's why we're also seeing a lot of, particularly the larger employers, right, investing directly in training programs. So that's what we need to do, particularly in Montana, where we don't have a lot of those large employers. We need to pool our employers to say, hey, let's work together to put a training program together that delivers the skills you need. The interesting thing about that, and we even sort of talked about this sort of similar to the AIM High program with Cognizant, is, I mean, they're being selective, they're focused on meeting their precise needs, but there's a model also that we talked about, which is an open enrollment model. Now you've got employers hopefully competing for talent, right? How far do you let a really talented kind of trainee go through a boot camp before you offer them a job at the risk, or don't offer them a job at the risk that somebody else does that? So that's, Russ, I think what we're trying to do. There's no question that kind of boot camp models, and that's why we started the Code School kind of 7 years ago, is this is a model that clearly kind of works in terms of get people fast. I mean, even look at UM Western as well that you mentioned, right? In terms of their kind of block schedule, kind of focused training works. So, and it's sort of it's a win-win.
I keep lobbying Seth to put in that program at the U of M main campus. I think you'd get 1,000 new students in no time.
This has been recorded. I do not represent the academic.
I know. So just quickly, I think you'd get a big support from Pardis Mandavi on auto mechanic school. Ask her the question.
All right.
Sorry, we're getting off track here, but I've known Paul for so long, and he is so successful and has done so much for the university, from entrepreneurship to the business plan competition to now this. It's just, I think this is going to have a real game changer impact on Montana.
Thank you, Ross. But it'll be a collective effort. It always is.
Yep. Well, thank you, Paul. We have a few minutes left if there are any other questions for Paul. seeing head shakes. So yeah, thank you so much, Paul, and we'll continue to hear more and learn more. And I'm excited for you to build up the team and get those outreach coordinators on board. And
Paul, excuse me, one other thing, Paul, I really hope you can designate someone from your team to join this remote work group on MEDA, which meets regularly.
Yep.
So we can keep up with what you're doing, and you can hear what MEDA is doing.
That is a great suggestion, Russ. We'll take that up and figure out who on our team is best placed to do that. But yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, Ann.
Okay, well, I think we have about 10 minutes left. And I think we'll wrap up the rapid retraining portion of this call. I left there. This ended up being a robust conversation, and it went a little longer than I thought it would, but I wanted to leave some time for kind of the group to share, resources or projects kind of similar to the rapid retraining that, are maybe you're seeing push forward in your community that might be helpful for the entire group to hear about. So we have about 10 minutes if anyone wants to share information, resources. This is the time to do that. One thing I'll share is that with all of I think we talked about this on the last call, and Paul kind of alluded to it, rapid retraining is just one of the ARPA training programs that are available, and a lot of, I think, the work around, building these training programs and figuring out like all the different puzzle pieces to try to, match the trainees and the employers with all the sources of support. We did at MEP hold a webinar a couple weeks ago that focused on all of those ARPA training dollars. We had great attendance, and I've gotten good feedback from the businesses who attended. That webinar is available on MEP's website. Happy to share it, and I'd be interested if you all are doing stuff like that to kind of get the word out about all of these new resources that are just becoming available.
I have something that's not necessarily to do with ARPA or Good Jobs Challenge or any of those things, but I'm sure some of you are familiar or are maybe doing it in your community, but pending board approval tomorrow morning, we're partnering with American Jobs for American Youth to host a summer jobs program for Yellowstone County. I know the Flathead region is getting it, Forsyth. It's been very successful in Helena. And I might be missing a community, so I'm sorry if it's your community that I'm missing for anyone on this call, but we're really excited and are hoping that our employers are excited as well for us to launch this in our community. Helena speaks very highly of it, and with student engagement and just a different way to get students at a high school level involved in the workforce in our community.
Nice. Thanks, Marcel. Anyone else want to share an update? Oh, there's a message. Yes, Chris, I will send you the webinar link. Kelly, I noticed that you put some info in the chat at the beginning of the call, Kelly Cresswell. Did you want to share about that with the group?
Sure, I can do that, and Wes Weiss might want to jump in too on that. Retire Montana, AJ Montana, Helena Winds, and the Department of Labor and Industry are bringing Dr. Robert Schindel to Helena to do a workshop at Carroll College on maximizing work-based learning opportunities. It's largely targeted to employers, so along the lines of some of the things that Paul was talking about in terms of helping employers create a successful environment for someone who's coming into their place of work. Dr. Schindel leads a company called Intern Bridge. So he works with many campuses throughout the country, specifically on internship programs. This one will be more broadly focused on all kinds of work-based learning opportunities. So April 21st in Helena, $69 per person, which includes breakfast and lunch for nonprofits, $99 for for-profits. So the flyer's in the chat. Wes, I know you know a lot about Dr. Schindel. Anything to add?
I just highly recommend anyone that could send folks to it. We hosted it when I was at Carroll College for employers, and it was very successful. And now that it's broadened to other work-based learning opportunities, it'll be that much more successful. And Department of Labor and Industry is proud to be a part of it with the great folks bringing Robert to Helena again.
Yeah, that's an awesome workshop. I think we hosted one in Missoula last year. It was well received. Cool. Chris?
A quick update, because this is the MEDA workforce group. In as you're aware, we've been at MBAC has been working on a lot of related workforce issues. One though is with veterans, and I want to tell you some of the activity we've been doing, because we'd like to encourage other parts of the state to take part. So there's a program called SkillBridge through the Department of Defense, which many of you have heard through other meetings about, that allows a member to leave up to as early as 6 months, as long as there's an employer who's an approved SkillBridge employer, and that employer is offering either OJT or some other training. It might be pre-apprenticeship and might lead to apprenticeship, but the DoD pays that military member for that time of service until they're actually off active duty. And we've got an employer here in Helena who has taken advantage of that. They've hired actually one SkillBridge veteran in November. They're hiring a second one in March. And we're working with a group of employers here in Helena to encourage and sort of share how you get to be approved, and then, you know, what you're doing. In addition to that is, because there is a pretty good veteran support network in Helena for a lot of different reasons, is getting that support group as well to be a resource for those employers. So when they're bringing those new employees on, particularly if they're from out of Montana, that then there's some other resources they can tap into the community to find out about housing or childcare or education, depending on what their needs are. So we'll keep you posted, but right now we're actively, we've got a construction business that's the SkillBridge hires. We're working with one of the local hospitals that is looking at it pretty carefully. One of the state agencies is also looking at it, a couple of state agencies. And so we're trying to help coordinate that and get everybody talking. The piece that we're also working on when you're talking about training dollars is, so the employers though don't get, you know, they get this employee and they don't have to worry about salary, but what about the training dollars that employer needs because of the time they're putting in for the OJT or equipment maybe that they're purchasing for that employee so that they can, you know, do their job. So we're working on that. And we've talked to a couple of different, either through ARPA funding or otherwise. So anyway, we'll keep you posted on that, but and Montana has less than a dozen SkillBridge approved employers in the state, which is really it's sad because we could have a lot more for what that program offers. And again, if this one business in Helena is any example, as soon as they got approved, they had 20 applicants, and they've hired now 2, and they're going to hire at least 2 to 3 more. And that's why we're trying to build this out, because if there's an applicant that's qualified, but they can't hire enough people, can we share that with another similar business or other expertise? So we'll keep you posted on this working group.
You know, Chris offered to help Nomad to get into SkillBridge as well, as along with John Caldwell. So Chris, John and I will both be contacting you, I'm sure. One thing before SkillBridge that we would like to do, because we do have such a strong group of veterans in our employment, is a VRG, a veteran resource group through Nomad itself. And do you know any other companies that have that here in Montana that I could call and ask them how to set that up or what's needed?
Yes. Yeah, we could talk, Dorothy. So that's kind of what the Helena Joint Community Forces Group is.
Yeah, I'm going to join that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's the mechanism to do that, and they're encouraging other statewide kind of community effort on that. But for a specific employer, mm-hmm. I'm not aware of that. But there is this community resource that they're more than happy to share what they've done, and their hope is actually, by having the program as they have, is to replicate it at other parts of Montana.
Okay.
So we're
going to do it as an employer. So I really like that. Thanks so much.
Quick note, and I know we're going to be going here in a minute, but something that I always like to look at when doing economic development, business development, et cetera, is clusters. And I don't know if you saw the announcement this morning, but Benefice is going to donate the land for the new $101 million nursing center at MSU. You add that to Tester's residency program, which could add 200 residency slots a year to Montana. You've got Brute's Praxis Center, which is going to be used for the high-tech medical area. And then we have a regular residency center, which at the U of M, which only has, I think, 10 slots open a year. Last year, they got 900 applications from new doctors. So Montana is really starting to become a focus point for healthcare education. So as you're talking to, high school students, college people, et cetera, there's a great way to get an incredible education, yet still stay in the state. So just something to think about.
Thanks, Russ. All right, we're at time. I'll just put in one last plug. We'll meet next month. If you have any ideas of topics or, programs like Paul's that you want to learn more about, please send an email to Mary and I. We're always looking for agenda items, or if you want to lead a discussion or dive deep into a topic, just let us know. We'll see you in March. Thanks, everybody.